Before I forget, we want to congratulate Alec Baldwin, married Hilaria. Now we have Hilaria Baldwin as his wife's name. Alec and Hilaria Baldwin. All right, let's see here. Hilaria. Anyway, let me tell you a little bit about this Marbury case, the background, because it always comes up and most people don't know about it. And he wants to be like John Marshall. It's more like Penny Marshall. What do you think of that, Mr. Producer? But that's a whole other story. Marbury versus Madison, that case was precipitated by the election of 1800, in which Thomas Jefferson, the incumbent vice president, leader of the Republicans, ran for president against the incumbent president, John Adams, leader of the Federalists. Now, the Federalists controlled both houses of Congress, but were torn between the followers of John Adams and Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton's faction withheld its support for Adams's re-election bid in 1800, and the race ended in an electoral college tie between Jefferson and the vice president, his vice presidential running mate, Aaron Burr. It was a mess. Adams came in third. The election was then thrown in the House of Representatives. Hamilton ultimately backed Jefferson, and Hamilton had no brief for Jefferson. Couldn't stand him either, and vice versa. Anyway, realizing he would not win the election, Adams moved to solidify his party's influence in the federal government. The passage of the Judiciary Act of 1801 created 16 new federal circuit judgeships. It was part of his strategy. So just prior to leaving office, Adams selected and the Federalist-controlled lame duck Senate confirmed nominees to fill the posts. Sounds like Obama. Adams's term ran out before John Marshall, who was then Secretary of State under Adams, could actually deliver the commissions of the office to some of the designees. Marshall's successor as Secretary of State under Jefferson was James Madison. And Madison refused to deliver the commissions at Jefferson's direction. And William Marbury, who was to receive one of these commissions, among others, filed suit in federal court seeking an order, writ of mandamus, directing Madison to deliver his commission as Justice of the Peace. Now, Marshall was a longtime rival of Jefferson's in Virginia politics. And Marshall was one of the most articulate leaders in the Federalist Party. He'd served in the Virginia State House, the U.S. House of Representatives, and as one of President Adams' representatives to France in 1797, and then lastly Secretary of State. Listen to this, he was nominated to be Chief Justice by President Adams and assumed the post on February 4, 1801, exactly 1 month before Adams left office. That's when he appointed the Chief Justice. Mark, where are you getting this from? Men in Black, the book I wrote 7 years ago. As well as, obviously, original sources. So with a Republican majority elected to both houses of Congress in 1800, Marshall realized Jefferson and his Republicans could denude the Supreme Court of authority, and that he, as Chief Justice, could be impeached and removed from office. See, I take all the varnish off this and tell you exactly what's going on. This is the politics of the time. Marshall understood that in the Marbury case, if he ordered Secretary of State Madison to deliver Marbury's commission to office, Jefferson would order Madison to ignore the Supreme Court's writ, and the court's authority would be seriously weakened. Because what could Marshall do? Marshall was also concerned that he not be seen as protecting the interests of the Federalist jurists, like Marbury, who had assumed his position as a justice of the peace and had been hearing cases and issuing judgments for a year. So bearing all this in mind, Marshall's decision in Marbury versus Madison, while upsetting the Constitution's balance of power in my view, and people think that's a controversial view, was a master political stroke. And without going more and more into history, it was a master political stroke. And in that decision comes the notion of judicial review. Now, there are other decisions, obviously much more to the history of John Marshall as Chief Justice of the United States. I think he was on that court 30 years or so. obviously had an enormous impact. The court before him and the chiefs before him really had very little power. So John Roberts sees himself as a modern-day John Marshall, or that's his attempt to build that type of a situation. And I think about that and I say, Mr. Justice Roberts, your job is to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. And what you did the other day, and what you've been doing for the last 6 weeks behind the scenes, is a disgrace. It's a disaster. Like I said, John Marshall, you're more like Penny Marshall. I'll be right back.